Well, thanks everyone for watching and listening. This is episode 300 of TechLaw10. I feel that should be some sort of fanfare, but maybe we'll do that afterwards. And I'm pleased to say that we're continuing our centenary tradition of every 100 podcasts or so we have a guest, and we're really honored that Tom Fox is with us. Now, Tom's probably the world's most prolific compliance podcaster. You've got around 19,000 LinkedIn followers alone, Tom. You started your career in 1983 as a litigator in Houston. Then you moved in-house with Halliburton in 2004 and broadened your horizons and traveled into the Middle East and Europe. And then you had in-house roles with graphics and drilling businesses. And then you set up the Compliance Podcast Network in 2018, which seems to have been an insightful thing given how podcasts have changed since. And thanks so much for joining us. And what we hoped you'd do is maybe pick 3 or 4 or 5 topics that have changed in your career, and particularly since episode 1 of TechLaw10, and then Eric and I'll just reflect on those and see if we sort of agree or disagree, or that strikes a chord with us. How does that sound, Tom?
Sounds great.
And as my way of welcome, Tom and I were in law school together in the 1980s at the great University of Michigan Law School. So hail to the victors valiant. Thank you for joining us.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
So what's your number 1 then, Tom?
So, Jonathan, what I would like to explore is not exactly tech, but tech adjacent. And it is the use of data analytics. And for lawyers, this was not so much revelatory, I would say maybe evolutionary. And I would point you to, in my world of anti-bribery, anti-corruption, 2016, where for the first time, the Securities and Exchange Commission, in an enforcement action against a Houston company called Key Energy, called out data analytics. And that case was around as basic a topic as gifts, travel, and entertainment, specifically gifts at Christmas time, paid by Key Energy executives to executives at Pemex who were responsible for contracts. And they were very expensive gifts given to Pemex officials, and Key Energy got into FCPA hot water with those. And what the SEC said was, if someone had run some analytics around the value of those gifts versus the value of either the gifts that had been previously approved by the compliance function or even were allowed without compliance approval, they would have seen a very much higher spend. And from that really straightforward line of not simply analysis, but direction the SEC suggested we go in compliance, we've moved forward to pre-pandemic. Data analytics became much more ubiquitous. Post-pandemic, data analytics then led to or became a part of the wedding of both data and AI to give us a much broader ability. Now, along the way, the regulators in the form of the Department of Justice were talking about data, not necessarily data analytics. So, for instance, in 2020, during the pandemic, the Department of Justice released the 2020 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs. And in that document, the DOJ said for the first time, a chief compliance officer had to have access to all data within a corporation. So typically, data had been and continues to be siloed amongst different corporate functions, whether it be finance, operations, sales, HR, et cetera, compliance. And now we have the DOJ saying back in 2020, hey guys, somebody's got to be able to look at all that. So all of these sort of disparate themes kind of came together after OpenAI or after AI. now that they're data analytics tools that can look at massive amounts of data, they're not going to discover fraud. They're not going to discover corruption, but they're going to discover anomalies. And we have, at least in the compliance world, data analytics specialists and data scientists appended to compliance programs simply to do the data mining to see what might be out there. It's not limited to sales. It's certainly procurement is a big part of this, and procurement typically is 10x to maybe even 100x times the amount of sales of a company. A company's largest spend is through their procurement function or supply chain, if you want to look at it in that way. So sort of theme one I wanted to explore with you guys is this rise of data and certainly the tech implications of that. But in each one of your practices, how has maybe the use of data changed either detection and or prevention or even remediation?
Yeah, interesting. Do you want to take the first shot, Eric?
I'll let you go first, please.
I think from my point of view, I think I'm getting more involved post the event. So I think I agree with you that organizations can use analytics, can use basic business intelligence to try and stop bad things happening or nip them in the bud earlier. On another podcast I talked recently about the problems of the SNP, the Scottish political party, which almost certainly, if analytics had been run over things like expense accounts, would have shown the problems much earlier. After the event, I think the use of tech has revolutionized how we do investigations, and we have had an investigation where we were under some pressure because we're doing work for a listed entity. It's about to hit reporting deadlines. The auditors are thinking disclose to the stock exchange or not. There's all sorts of time pressures. And we used AI to support bits of that investigation, not to make decisions, but to suggest who we might interview next. And we also use technology to look at some of the artifacts from the fraud, which had been created using AI and using fakery. So that bit, I think, has definitely changed the sort of the tools that you have to investigate. But at the same time, I think regulators have been concerned about some of that as well, because, of course, that involves the processing of more data and the processing of data on, on people that might be innocent or looking at things that you're not really searching for. So I've been interested, for example, in the Garante, the Italian data privacy authority, has investigated ITA Airways, the airline formerly known as Alitalia. And it was responding to complaints about one particular individual, happened to be the then chair. But the Italian authorities have said there's almost too much analytics going on. There was too much data in the pot that they searched, and they weren't focused enough in the way in which they search, and they weren't transparent enough with those connected with the organization. So I think we're certainly going to see a growth in analytics, both for prevention and as part of the investigation after the event. But I guess I'd give what I hoped wouldn't be a lawyerly answer of saying you need a bit of caution, and that doesn't mean to say it's a free-for-all to have systems crawling all over the place. We've had an analogous thing, I think, with CCTV, where a lot of people have installed CCTV systems to prevent fraud, particularly in a retail environment. But regulators, as a general rule, have hit out against that and said, there must be an itch that you're scratching rather than general permission to do surveillance, to do analytics constantly.
And I guess I'll add the following. Excuse me. This is a wide open, broad topic. I'll come at it from this angle. Companies and organizations now have and maintain so much data of all types with respect to their clients and customers. And of course, they have privacy policies where they purport to make promises to protect sensitive information of their clients and customers. And then the question comes in, is that actually a reality? Are those protections actually afforded that are promised? And if not, what are the consequences?
Yeah, good topic. I feel like I should have a sort of quiz show roulette wheel because we didn't ask for notice of these topics in advance.
Oh, I know.
But spin the wheel, Tom. What's topic 2?
Yeah. So topic 2 is also an evolution, but this comes from the regulatory side. And once again, my area of expertise is anti-bribery, anti-corruption. And in that world, everyone has a role. It starts with the legislators or parliamentarians who actually enact laws. It goes to enforcers here in the United States, Department of Justice, Securities and Exchange Commission, in the United Kingdom, other agencies. But it flows down to people like the three of us on this podcast. And I've always been intrigued by our role in the individual fight against what I see as the international scourge of bribery and corruption, which the UN estimates has cost the global economy between $3 and $4 trillion annually. And that I've been very passionate about it, my advocacy for compliance to fight this scourge. But I wanted to take that and maybe expand it into some of the other areas of law that we have encountered over the past 15 years. And I'll start with data privacy, and certainly GDPR being one of the, if not the most well-known law in around privacy, although there are multiple other laws around data privacy and data protection. And as we move forward now into this century, and I love this next phrase, 2030, which is technically mid-century. You're now almost living in mid-century, guys. Hopefully, Tech10 will be around in mid-century. And for episode 400, now we have AI companies asking the U.S. government for regulatory frameworks. Now, there's going to be some debate around, what those frameworks might be, but they want frameworks and they want regulation. And so we have actually the industries asking for regulation. And that is really something new. We didn't have industries asking for anti-bribery laws in the 70s. I don't think we had industries in the United States asking for data privacy, data protection laws. Maybe it was different in the United Kingdom or the EU. So this sort of evolution now where AI companies are saying, we need some protections. This tool may be so powerful. We don't know how powerful it can be, but it may become so powerful that we need frameworks around it. And we need everyone to understand, at least those who aren't the bad guys, understand these are the rules we're all going to play by. So I really was interested in your take on how we've evolved in some of these areas. And with GDPR, even though we don't have a U.S. GDPR, we still have GDPR as the gold standard. And many U.S. companies take the position, if we're going to be doing business internationally, that's the standard we're going to meet. It will give us cover in Brazil. It will give us cover in the EU. It will give us cover in the United Kingdom. It will give us cover in every state in the United States. And so we're going to accept that. And then as we move forward on AI, will the EU AI Act give us that same sort of framework that we can at least look at and understand our obligations as lawyers advising corporations, and corporations then understanding their legal obligations as well?
This is a great topic. If I can jump in, this AI genie is definitely out of the bottle, shall we say. And there have been states here in the United States that have wanted themselves to get involved in attempting to regulate AI before it gets this train, to another metaphor, gets too far out of the station, with some pushback from our administration in Washington, which wants to have sort of an open season with AI AI companies doing what they want to do. What might be interesting is we're seeing some real unpopularity with respect to big AI among the population here in the United States. And it could be a real issue in the upcoming midterm elections. People are concerned about, and maybe it's a little bit off topic, about losing their jobs because of AI, concerns about, information and how AI is used. And also the AI data centers, popping up in their own backyards. And it could be an election issue coming up here. Some disparate thoughts, but I thought I'd throw them into the mix.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think I think it's been also interesting the way in which big tech businesses have dealt with the intersection with GDPR and EU regulation. I'm struck by the initial investigation into OpenAI by the Garante, the Italian Data Protection Authority. And I think the initial press release was effectively to say, look, we're a US corporation. What's an Italian regulator got to do with us? We're carrying on regardless. And within 24 hours, the CEO is on a plane to Italy. He's saying his favorite food is pasta, and Italy's his favorite place to go on vacation. So that whole, whatever the Italian for volte-face is, the way in which he pivots and becomes somebody who says, you can't regulate me, to say, I'm coming over to have face-to-face discussions and I've cleared my diary. And we've certainly seen an awful lot of lobbying activity by US AI providers. I imagine they're funding half of the Brussels lobbyists, half of the UK lobbying activity at the moment. And I think they want regulation, but they want regulation that suits them. And I think one of the issues that probably AI companies are getting at the moment, that a lot of EU regulation particularly is a bit of a mess. And I think the EU AI Act set out to bring clarity, but I think some of the bits that the EU AI Act are trying to do were already regulated. If we look at the GDPR investigations against AI, I think I'm right in saying that all of the big AI providers, all of the big US AI-based providers have been investigated under GDPR, as I've said. OpenAI has, for one. And so I think what they're wanting is almost some sort of certainty of a regulatory regime. As Eric said, as states in the US do piecemeal regulation, then it's costly to comply with unless you take one piece of legislation as the gold standard and assume that that legislation is uniform. I think we're already seeing that with the EU AI Act, where again Italy has brought in additional legislation regulating things like advice by clinicians. And then we've had some interesting litigation as well. I became aware of a case this morning, for example. I don't routinely read court reports from the Munich District Court, I'm afraid, although I am there next week. But they've had an interesting case in the last couple of days where they've said, look, if AI law isn't going to regulate, then to some extent the courts must, and Google have just lost some litigation where effectively a AI-assisted search was inaccurate. Google relied on their traditional defense, we're just a search engine. The courts have said, no, you're not. Not when you're controlling AI and serving bits that you've trawled from the website as fact. So I think there are going to be some real areas of uncertainty, and my gut feel is that's what the AI providers want. They don't necessarily want regulation; they want certainty. And I think the only way they think they can get certainty is by more regulation. You've got a third one for us, Tom?
I do. I'm somewhat sheepish to have to admit you guys started podcasting before me.
Oh, no.
But I'm going to say you're not in compliance. So I'm going to keep the mantle of the first podcaster in compliance. I'm going to say you all were in tech. Whether that rubric works or not, we'll leave that to others. But I want to talk about podcasting. I want to talk about lawyers. And I want to talk about what that has meant for our profession. And I'll start with my experience around podcasting. And then I'm really interested in maybe y'all's collective thoughts on it. So I started podcasting in 2012. I cringe at some of those early podcasts. When I look at them, I had was in the middle of several rounds of brain surgery. So my head was shaved. It was the complete package, as one might say. And I evolved, obviously. I started a compliance podcast network. I've got, I think, 110 shows I've started over the years. Wow. And now I have a second network. But in many ways, the podcast has been many different things to me. It has been a ton of fun, an absolute ton of fun. And I tell people I have two metrics for a successful podcast, and two metrics only. Number one, how much did I learn? And number two, how much fun did I have? That's it. And very few have failed to meet that standard. Some have, but largely it's just been fun to do this. Two, it has made me an exponentially better lawyer. I never pretended to be the smartest guy in the room, but I talk to the smartest people in the room. And because I talk to every smartest person in the room, I can put it together in ways that others can't. I can connect the dots. And that's led to 35 plus books I've written since 2010, all because of podcasting. And it has, I've created a business out of it. Compliance Podcast Network, my full-time work now. I still practice law, but don't tell anybody that. And it has just been, and for lawyers, I think many lawyers, obviously you guys accepted from this next statement, don't understand the power of podcasting to increase their personal brand. And I'm a huge proponent of the brand of you. And I think podcasting is one of the best ways to enhance the brand of you. You can do it with simply a podcast. You can take a transcript and write a blog. You can create clips for social media sharing opportunities. You can really get your brand out there in ways that none of us could when we started practicing law. And for 20 or 30 years, we were limited to either speaking at bar conferences or writing articles for bar journals. And so the podcast evolution for me has been a huge part of my personal development as a lawyer. It's given me a way to re-energize my career because literally I'm having fun in everything I do. And if I record 6 podcasts a day, well, I enjoy that. So it's not like working for me. So I really wanted to ask you all to really kind of explore what the podcast has meant to you, as opposed to you both lecture, you both write, you're heavily involved in your specific communities, but what just has the podcast itself meant for you guys?
This is a marvelous topic. And first of all, thank you so much for your support for our podcast. And we're delighted this is number 300, and we want to carry on strong into the future. I began a weekly internet law column. They weren't even called blogs back then in the mid 1990s, and I was doing them weekly to the point where I'd written about 2,000 of them on a weekly basis, dealing with the intersection of law and technology. Then Jonathan joined our firm, the firm I'm still at, Duane Morris, and we met up in 2010. I believe we started this podcast in early 2011. And for me, it's been wonderful. I mean, the blog, first of all, was very helpful in, as you say, branding and creating awareness. It enhanced my own education. It brought in a lot of legal work at a time that was very exciting. Met Jonathan. We decided to do this blog together. Jonathan and I have become great friends. So I appreciate the friendship. It brings us together on a frequent basis. As we all know, Jonathan's a genius, and I learn from him on a constant basis. And I love that. Over time, this blog has been instrumental, again, in getting the word out in terms of what I do, what our firm does. It keeps me on my toes. And then more recent times, I've been very active as a university professor. And this comes really, hand in glove with my teaching. And I love teaching, and I love, bringing to light the same types of topics I handle at the university here and our podcasts. So I'm, as you say, it's fun, and hopefully helpful for others. Those are my thoughts. And thank you for raising this topic. It's very good for number 300.
Yeah, I think it's a super topic as well, and yeah, I echo everything you said, Eric, and I do look forward to our chats, and I look forward to the intellectual challenge of it. And you might have a different recollection, but my recollection is that we were chatting to each other by phone, and it was the Duane Morris people, and that's people like Haley and Tom, who've been around from the start, who said, well, if you're speaking anyway, why don't you podcast it? So I think some of the credit goes to the Duane Morris team who've helped us for 300 podcasts, and some of the credit goes to Adam and Ted and the team who help us put it together now. And so I think partly it's the work of others. I agree with you that it's just a great thing for the two of us to connect, but also to have that intellectual challenge and to let people into a secret. As a general rule, we never tell each other what we're going to say in advance. It's obviously not scripted. You'll guess that by the fluffs. I think we've only edited one, to my knowledge, and that was my bad after I ranted about a certain individual, and very kindly the people at Duane Morris, because I was still there at the time, said they would make it live if I wanted, but did I want to reflect on the personal litigation risk? And we did, and we edited that away. But I think it is the fact that it broadens your mind and it makes you think about topics that you wouldn't have thought about before, including with your question. And I'd just say one other thing about the teaching. So I'm teaching mostly at Fordham, and I'm teaching a class of mostly chief compliance officers or people who'd like to get to that. And I'm fortunate enough in that Fordham let me set materials that can be mixed media as the pre-research. So I have set TechLaw10 podcasts. I've set Everything Compliance podcast with you, Tom, as the pre-course materials. And I think we're not in a world now where people only engage with podcasts or only engage with films or only engage with the written world. I think you need that rich texture to learn topics and to gather information like, magpies from different places. And I think that builds up your knowledge bank. And I think that enriches everything you do. And I think that you're right. It makes you a better lawyer. It makes you a better compliance professional. It makes you a better tech person by seeing those different insights. And just one last thing. One of my rules for the Fordham class is I will set materials that I don't agree with. And I think that's important as well in this age where so much of what we see is echo chambers. We've talked before, probably in about 60 of the 300 podcasts, about social media algorithms and stuff like that. But in a world where more and more of our stuff is narrowly focused, and there are various people, political parties trying to put blinkers on us, I think the more we can take those blinkers off and see stuff we don't necessarily agree with, the better.
Shine the light.
Yeah.
Well, have we reached the conclusion? Have we reached the conclusion of number 300? What do you think?
That was my 3.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we want to
I
thank
think
you
what a
so much.
fantastic one.
I do too. And we'd love to have you back for 400. Are you game?
I'm in. All in.
Well, wonderful. Why don't we each do our own salutation? I'm Eric Sinrod at Dwayne Morris in the San Francisco office. I can be reached at ejsinrod@dwaynemorris.com. Delighted to be with you 300 times. I want to see you more often.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this, Tom. I'm Jonathan Armstrong, jonathan.armstrong at Punter, Southall.law. Thanks, everyone, for listening. For everyone who's listened to all 300, let us know. We'll send you a pen or some gift or something, or a London bus. And Tom, as our guest, you get the privilege to take it home.
And I'm Tom Fox. I can be reached via email, tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I podcast daily at the Compliance Podcast Network, which is www.compliancepodcastnetwork.net. And if you'd like storytelling with a local flavor, check out the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network, and you'll learn about the most beautiful part of the great state of Texas, the Texas Hill Country.
Well, thank you all.
Cheers. Thank you.